For a lot of reasons, this is a big year for the Miami Hurricanes. This is a team that has high expectations heading into 2024, and today we take a deep dive into the Miami Hurricanes to see what should we expect from this team this year. Mario Cristobal has done a good job, but can they meet those high expectations? Before we do that, though, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, share the video. It goes a long way in helping this channel. This deep dive series has been tremendous, and it's not possible without all of you. We're wrapping up here with the last handful of videos. Miami Hurricanes are up next. So let's dive right into them. Now, Mario Cristobal has done a good job on the recruiting trail. There obviously have been some hiccups on the field that need to get sorted out. And everybody already knows that. So we don't need to dive too much into that. Obviously, Cristobal has some things to fix himself in terms of coaching decisions, what he lets certain people do, specifically offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson. Does he continue to dial things back, or is he going to let Shannon Dawson do what he does best? Dawson, I think, did a really good job last year and now has a group of skill position players that are ready to make some serious noise in 2024. But is Cristobal going to let that happen, or is he going to hold them back? I think that of everything that I've seen, it sounds like they're ready to make a serious run, and part of that is Cristobal delegating responsibilities to the guys that he has hired to make those certain decisions. Also, in-game decisions, obviously everybody knows that we need to see some improvement from Cristobal on that end. But again, with the talent that you have, some of those losses that you saw in the last couple of years probably not going to happen in 2024. You also have Lance Guidry coming back on the defensive side of the ball, calling the plays, a defense that I think is going to be really fun to watch if you are paying attention to the Miami Hurricanes. But again, you're going to have to overcome certain teams, specifically, obviously, the Clemsons, the Florida States. There are certain things that must happen for Miami to take those steps, and it's just a matter of what is this team capable of doing? Is their head coach in the right place? He's bringing in the right kind of talent, and we'll dive into that here in a little bit. But you're bringing the right guys to this program, and it's going to be fun to see what they can do in 2024 with the guys they have coming back. Obviously, when you talk about Cristobal, you've seen his recruiting. You've also seen his ability to bring in talent from the transfer portal. You get guys like Tyler Barron and Simeon Barrow on the defensive line. Those were two solid additions for Miami. You also get Elijah Alston and CJ Clark and Marley Cook on that side of the football, at that same side of the same positions, the defensive line. You also, obviously, at the quarterback position for a while, I think people were a little bit concerned. You get Reese Poffenbarger from Albany, not exactly the Miami player that a lot of people were expecting from the transfer portal. But then you do get Cam Ward, a guy who considered going pro, then enters his name of the transfer portal out of Washington State, and Miami does win those sweepstakes. That was probably a sigh of relief for Miami fans, but also you feel really good now with where your program's sitting. You also got an underrated transfer in Sam Brown from Houston, a very explosive player as long as he keeps his head cool. And then you also got Damian Martinez from Oregon State. So you felt pretty good about the players that you bring in from the transfer portal. You also don't, I think, if you're a Miami fan, you don't feel too bad about the players that you lose. Some players, obviously, you would like to have back. I think that every single Miami fan wants Kobe Young back, but I don't think outside of him, there are a ton of players that you necessarily feel too bad about losing. You lost quite a bit of talent, but Cristobal and the staff have done a good job of bringing in the right players to fix those holes in certain positions and finding ways to get really good players to step up in their place. One of those players obviously is Cam Ward. Getting Cam Ward from Washington State from the transfer portal was one of the biggest additions probably for any team in college football this year. Cam Ward is electric when he's throwing the football. We've already seen a number of clips from practices, scrimmages, all that stuff that have shown his ability to throw the football. and we're going to see him throw to some really talented wide receivers, and we'll dive into that group more in a little bit. He is the starter, and I think a lot of people are excited to see what he can do in Shannon Dawson's system. Now, when you look at what Shannon Dawson has done, you look at his time at Houston and really just with Dana Holgerson, you saw some really good things from him. You saw him take Clayton Tune and kind of take him from being this relatively unknown 3-star to a guy who got an NFL job because of Shannon Dawson, because of his coaching, and because of his play calling. You expect some really good things with a talent like Cam Ward because Cam Ward brings more to the table than I think Clayton Tune did. So you feel pretty good if you're a Miami fan about what you get from Cam Ward, not just because he's a hype name, but also because of the talent level and what you've seen on film. This is a guy who can make a lot of really exciting throws, and that's huge because when you look at the quarterback position before they got Cam Ward, I think that's probably going to be one of those positions that you would look back on and say, yeah, we really should have gotten a quarterback that was going to help us a little bit more. Fortunately for Miami, Ward doesn't go pro. He enters the transfer portal, and now he is in Miami in a Hurricanes uniform. Behind him, Emory Williams and Poffenbarger. We talked about him before. Those are two guys that are going to battle it out for the backup role. Should Ward either need a break, they're up by a lot, and for Cam Ward goes down, that's going to be who they turn to next. So maybe a little bit of a drop off there. But if Cam Ward is running the show, you feel really good about where this group is headed. This team also felt the need to add a running back. I think that was one of the uh, obvious things for Miami. They obviously knew you have a guy like Mark Fletcher that was going to be solid. You have a Jay Allen and Chris Johnson Jr. So it's not a matter of needing talent, but how many proven players did you have? And I think that this offense needed to add a running back, which is why they get Damian Martinez. Now, Damian Martinez is a solid running back. He's maybe not that home run threat that you might want in your offense, but Damian Martinez is going to get you that solid yardage. If you need 3 or 4 yards. He has no problem doing that on a consistent basis. And he's used to playing in a physical style of offense. He comes from that pro scheme from Oregon State. So you're going to find ways to get him more involved. It's going to be a very different system that he plays in under Shannon Dawson, but you're going to see that in this system, the field's open a little bit more than he's used to. Now, you did obviously see some shotgun looks from Oregon State. So it's not going to be a brand new concept to him, but you're going to get him the football in smaller boxes, less crowded places, and find him in one-on-one situations. That's going to be huge for Oregon or for Miami, the former Oregon State transfer, and his success this year. Now, Mark Fletcher is a solid player, had a pretty good end of the season in 2023. I think that he'll still be part of this rotation, and he'll be really fun to watch as well. Now we get to the wide receivers. This is a group that is going to have a ton of hype heading into 2024. Part of that has to do with Cam Ward's arrival. Part of that has to do with the talent you have coming back and also coming in from the transfer portal. Getting Samuel Brown is probably one of the more slept on additions by any team. I thought that was a really good pickup by Miami and Mario Cristobal, joining Jacoby George and Xavier Restrepo. That gives you a trio that's a nightmare for a lot of teams to cover. Jacoby George is that big explosive threat. Restrepo has been an absolute nightmare to cover, whether he's in the slot, whether he's outside. Just getting him the football is going to mean good things for Miami. And Cam Ward is very capable of distributing the football. You do not need a ton of time for Cam Ward to get a guy open or for these players to get open. Samuel Brown is a big play threat. Jacoby George is a big play threat. Obviously, you lose Colby Young. That's another threat that could be part of that. But you did a good job of replacing him. Restrepo is an absolute stud, bright future in the NFL for all three of them potentially, and that's huge. Elijah Arroyo is a very slept on tight end, in my opinion, in college football. I think that he is set for a big year, someone who could have a bigger role in Miami's offense. Again, Cam Ward is going to find whoever's open. It does not matter if it's this wide receiver. It does not matter what your name is. He is going to find you if you are open. So Arroyo could play a huge role as well. JoJo Trader, Isaiah Horton, and Ray Joseph are the next trio to keep an eye on for the wide receiver position. Those are guys that have big play potential. It's just going to be a matter of how many touches can they get, how much time do they get, how many reps do they get, that kind of stuff. And having that kind of depth is not necessarily a bad thing, though. You feel pretty good about the depth you have behind Brown, George, and Restrepo. So if they do need a breather for whatever reason, you feel pretty good about where they're headed. Cam McCormick is back for his ninth year. I don't know how that's possible. That just seems so weird, so wrong, but he is back for another year. That's solid depth at the tight end position. And after that is where you'll look at guys like Riley Williams. So we'll see what happens at the tight end position, but you feel pretty good about the depth overall at the pass catching positions, and you feel pretty good about where this team is headed offensively. And you will find that this is a group that finished in the 30s and 40s for a lot of the statistical categories. This is a group that I think wants to get into that top 25 range, and you're going to be able to do that with the talent you have coming back. Part of that also is you're going to have to do it with the offensive line, and you feel very good about where this offensive line is headed. Jalen Rivers is back, opposite of Francis Mauigoa. You have two tackles that are set to be all ACC type players and players that are ready to take their game to another level, probably have futures in the NFL as well. Samson Okunlola and Inez Cooper are going to be two of the guards to keep an eye on there. But again, Mario Cristobal, one of the things that he's going to do really well is bring in offensive line talent to compete. And part of that competing means you have multiple options. So just because someone is penciled in right now doesn't mean that someone can't take their place. Now, Jalen Rivers and Francis Mauigo are probably two guys that I don't think are going to ever lose their spot unless they get hurt. So those are two guys you feel pretty solid about. It's just going to come down to the interior. You also got Zach Carpenter from Indiana. That was a very underrated transfer. Definitely flew under the radar. Still probably is flying under the radar. Getting him at center. The question is just going to be how much chemistry does he need to build with Cam Ward? Are they already clicking, or are they taking some time to get things off? Ryan Rodriguez could be part of that as well. But if they can find chemistry right off the bat and this offensive line gets things going, you feel very good about where this offense is headed. You brought in plenty of talent from the transfer portal, but mostly, I think more important is the talent you have returning. You have a lot of returning talent from whether you recruited them at the high school level, whether you brought them in last year from the transfer portal. And that's probably the biggest thing because when I'm looking through this too deep, you don't see a ton of transfer portal talent this year on the offensive side of the ball. Now, the defense is a little bit different, but we'll dive into them in just a little bit. But the offensive line, you feel pretty good about. You feel very good about the tackle positions. You feel good about the skill positions. And there's really no excuse for Cristobal this year. This team is playoff or bust. And this is also a team that feels like they can compete for a national championship. This fan base probably expects that. I don't know what the vibe is surrounding this program, but a national championship is definitely on the minds of a lot of people. And I think that they are ready to see that success because it has been a while since Miami has been in that national championship conversation. And part of that's on the offense, but part of that's also on this defense. And Lance Guidry has a really talented group starting up front. Ruben Bain is an absolute stud. If you look at what Miami has, there are a number of players that you really like, and there are certain players that just take their game to another level because they're talented. Now, Ruben Bain's story coming out of high school is absolutely insane, and he is looking to do the exact same thing at the college level. This is someone who's a force, absolute unit of a man, 270 pounds, an absolute force, like I said, has the quickness to get around guys, but also has plenty of power to make life miserable for any tackle that he's facing. Now, one thing I'll say is he is going to help this team tremendously because he plays on defense, but also he's going to help Maui Goa and Rivers at the tackle positions, and they're also going to help him. You have, iron sharpens iron, and that's one thing that's going to fly under the radar is the fact that they have guys that are going to step up and play huge roles for this team, but not just because they're going to help them win games, but they're going to make the guys around them better. They're going to make the guys that they face in practice better, and that's something that's going to help this team as a whole and win more football games. Opposite of Bain, right now you have kind of a rotation between Akeem Mesidor and Elijah Alston, and that's going to be something that you'll want to keep an eye on. And it'll be really fun to see what they can do opposite of Ruben Bain. Now, Ruben Bain is a tremendous talent, but he's not going to have to have the luxury, I should say, of facing one-on-one matchups. He is going to get chips sent his way, double teams, maybe even triple teams. But you brought in a number of talent from the transfer portal last year, this year, that are going to make his life a little bit easier. But that also means guys like Mesidor and Alston get plenty of options in terms of one-on-one matchups. Malik Bryant could be also be in that conversation where you see guys get favorable matchups and opportunities to showcase their skill set. On the inside, I should say also Tyler Barron, who came from, well, technically Louisville, transferred from Tennessee to Louisville, didn't even really get much time at Louisville before getting back in the portal. I don't really know what to expect from him other than being a solid rotation piece. So we'll see about that. Now, the interior defensive line, this is where things get interesting. Simeon Barrow was a very good player for Michigan State. It's just Michigan State had team troubles where their team didn't have the success that he wanted, obviously, but he is an absolute stud. He is going to be a major problem for teams on the inside. CJ Clark, kind of the same thing, maybe not as good as Barrow, but CJ Clark is a very good player at defensive tackle. Marley Cook, very underrated addition from Middle Tennessee. He is someone that was very productive for the Blue Raiders, someone who is going to have a very interesting year for this team. We'll see what he's capable of doing, but this defensive line is deep. They are talented and they are deep, and that's something that's going to help this team long into the season because it's going to be a long year if you make a national championship run and you're going to need that depth. You will need players to step up. And when you're two or three deep at certain positions, you'll feel really good about where your team is fitting. Now, the linebacker position is going to benefit from that tremendously. Now, not only do they have a ton of talent, but you also get to benefit from having the defensive line you do. So guys like Wesley Bizante and Francisco Mauigoa are going to benefit from that. Now, Mauigoa is a heat-seeking missile and at linebacker. He is someone who has the ability to make tremendous disruptive plays, and he is someone that's going to affect the game. Everyone's going to focus probably on Ruben Bain, but Mauigoa is someone who can make that kind of an impact as well at the second level. He is an absolute joy to watch on the defensive side of the ball, plays the game really hard. And we've seen that in his career so far. It's something that he prides himself on, and he is going to have a major impact for this defense. And this is a defense that can get better, but they also have a lot of exciting players. There's a reason why they finished 12th against the run last year, and it's because the linebackers play a huge role, but also the defensive line. And the defensive line is going to obviously have a major impact, I should say, and also the linebackers have the talent to do the exact same. You also get Jalen Alderman from Louisville. That's a really interesting addition, good depth piece, that linebacker. So you feel really good if one of those two starters goes down. You also have Raul Popo Aguirre. He is someone that is going to step into a bigger role. Again, you might see that rotation, but it's tough to see Maui Goa coming off the field. So you only really have one other linebacker spot for them to take. The secondary is interesting because you have some new faces coming into the program. You have some interesting players that could play bigger roles for this team, and we'll see what they're capable of doing. But you also have some questions about a group that finished 55th last year, and that's a group that probably has to play better. But you also feel pretty good about the options you have coming back. Damari Brown and Daryl Porter at the corner positions are really fun to watch. I think they have tremendous talent and guys that are pushing them. Well, Dione Hill coming in from Marshall, he is going to push Brown for one of those starting spots. Porter's a veteran. I don't think he gets challenged, but I think that he is going to be a big veteran piece that's going to help some of these other guys get up to speed. Dione Hill comes in from a different system. So you're going to have to figure out ways to get him up to speed and understand how this system works. And I think that's where you get Daryl Porter coming into play. Jaden Harris is playing the nickel position. That's going to be a tough spot with some of the players that they play, but also facing wide receivers like he will in practice is going to make him better. The safety position is interesting. Zaquan Patterson and Michelle Powell, I think those are two guys that fly under the radar in the ACC, guys who are super talented and they'll be really fun to watch. But again, this is a group as a whole that must take a step forward. So the talent is there. It's just a matter of getting everyone on the same page and finding ways to get them into a position to make plays. You get Isaiah Taylor from Arizona. Isaiah Thomas comes back as well. Jadeus Richard. You have Markeith Williams. Again, you're bringing in a ton of talent. So again, the iron sharpens iron way of thinking. You have plenty of talented players from the high school level. You're bringing in certain players from the transfer portal. But again, I think that Miami did a good job of. They still brought in quite a few pieces. It was 15 that they brought in, but a lot of that had to do with the front group. The secondary doesn't necessarily need as much help per se, but I think you obviously still would have liked to see them add a player. But for now, you feel pretty good about the talent they have coming back. So keep an eye on that. We'll see what happens with that secondary. But again, if you are a Miami fan, you feel pretty good. That being said, you got to get the ball rolling right off the bat because the first game is a trip to Gainesville to play Florida. And this is a Florida team that everyone's just been saying, man, their schedule is hard. Billy Napier's on the hot seat. You have to find ways to win football games. You have to find a way to win six if you're going to keep your coach. That is going to get annoying to them, and they're going to play with a chip on their shoulder, and it's a rivalry game. So you're going to find that life is pretty difficult right off the bat. That being said, Miami is definitely the better team. I don't think there's any question about that, and they have to prove that. It might be tough, it might be a tighter game, but that's what happens when you play a rivalry game right off the bat. Everyone has been itching to hit another player that's wearing a different uniform, and this is the perfect way to get things started. So we'll see what happens there. They should start 1-0. Florida A&M and Ball State are also wins. Same with even though you're going at USF, that should be a 4-0 start for Miami. Virginia Tech is going to be interesting. It's a home game. Virginia Tech is ready to prove that last year was not a surprise. It's a Friday night game. We'll see what happens there, but that's a winnable game for Miami. That Cal is definitely a winnable game, though that trip to the West Coast is going to be difficult. Then you get 2 weeks off before you travel to Louisville and then host Florida State right after that. So those are two tougher games, though I think Louisville might not be as good as people are expecting. Florida State, another rivalry game. That's going to be a tough one. The last four games aren't necessarily terribly difficult, though Georgia Tech and Syracuse could provide some challenges. Getting Duke and Wake Forest at home obviously don't have a ton of concerns, but we also thought that last year about Georgia Tech when Miami faced them, and we all know how that turned out. So this is the team that if they're focused and you kind of avoid, say if you're undefeated going to the Duke game, if you can avoid that letdown game against Duke at home, because we've seen Miami have letdown games before, you have to find ways to avoid that. You have to find ways to stay focused because if you're undefeated at that point, you're looking at a team that is locked and loaded for a run at the national championship. You cannot afford a letdown game. I mean, you're still going to make the playoff, but in terms of your ability to win a national championship, you have to stay focused the entire year. So to me, 12-0 is the ceiling. There is not really much debate about that. There's not a single team that I don't think Miami can't beat. And I think that 12-0 is definitely the ceiling for this team because of the talent they have, because of the depth they have, and because of the different teams that you're facing. Now, when it comes to the floor, this is where it's tough because Miami always has that one game where you're like, what are you doing? But at the same time, when you're looking at this kind of realistically, the Florida game is a game that Florida could come out with a win. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's definitely possible. Virginia Tech is a game that will be tough. The Cal trip's going to be tough, but I don't. That's like if the one game where you're looking at, oh well, maybe that's a game that trips them up, but Miami's the better team. I think Louisville, in my opinion, is technically losable, but I wouldn't chalk that up to a loss. Florida State obviously is a losable game. If Georgia Tech's playing really well, that's also a game that they could lose. Same with Syracuse. But I honestly think at this point, 9-3 feels like the floor for Miami. I don't think that they are in a position where they're going to lose 4 or 5 games unless the wheels truly do fall off. And then you're starting to talk about Cristobal's future. So that's not where this team is headed. I don't think that they are in a position where they have to worry about that, and you're going to be more towards that ceiling side of things than the floor. That puts you into the ACC championship conversation. That puts you into the national championship conversation. And that's exactly where Miami not only needs to be, but exactly where they expect to be when the year is all said and done.